Imagine walking into like a really bustling, crowded restaurant. Almost instantly, your brain just categorizes the entire room.
Right, you don't even have to think about it.
Exactly. You naturally filter out the hum of the fluorescent lights, you completely ignore the clinking of silverware 3 tables away, and you just scan the space to find an empty table.
Your brain is doing all that heavy lifting automatically.
Yeah, but for an autistic child, that automatic filter, it just doesn't exist.
Huh?
Their brain is manually processing every single data point. The exact pitch of the background music, the temperature shift near the door, a tiny change in the waiter's facial expression.
It's all coming in at once, at full volume.
Right. And today, we were doing a deep dive into the science of the autistic mind based on a really fascinating stack of sources.
It's such an important topic, especially for families.
It really is.
Right.
So if you are a parent or a family member who has, just started navigating a new autism diagnosis with your child, take a deep breath.
Yeah, really, just take a breath.
This deep dive is designed specifically for you. And right up front, we want to give a clear disclaimer about our mission today. We are going to avoid the medical overload, the fear, and the shame.
Which, unfortunately, parents encounter a lot.
So much. We're operating on a foundational truth from today's research, which is that autism is a lifelong neurodevelopmental difference. It is not a disease, it's not the result of bad parenting, and it's not something that needs to be, quote-unquote, cured.
That framing fundamentally shifts the approach. Starting from a place of understanding neurobiology rather than, operating out of fear, it allows you to focus on supporting a child in a way that respects their actual neurological reality.
Right, it's about respect. So let's start with a brief look at the research. What is the core definition we're working with?
Well, the clinical and self-advocacy literature we're looking at defines autism as a genetic, multiply-determined neurodevelopmental disability.
Multiply-determined. What does that actually mean in plain English?
It basically means there is no single genetic switch. It's not just one gene. It involves a really complex combination of genetic factors that influence how the brain develops in utero.
Okay, so it's structural.
Exactly. It's a structural difference that affects how a person communicates, how they process sensory input, and how they regulate emotions. And because it's a structural variation in the brain's connectivity, it is permanent. Autistic children grow up to be autistic adults.
They don't just age out of it.
Right. It's a lifelong neurotype.
So let's go back to that restaurant scenario for a second to understand the structure. The sources talk about how the automatic filtering most people use is called top-down processing.
Yeah, top-down, you see the big picture first, and then you kind of fill in the details if you need them.
But autistic individuals generally use bottom-up processing, so they gather all those microscopic details first.
The lights, the sounds, the textures.
Right, all of it. And they have to consciously piece all that raw data together to form the big picture of the room.
And the cognitive load required for that, it is immense. A neurotypical brain uses mental shortcuts to conserve energy.
It's lazy, basically.
Yeah, exactly. The brain likes to be efficient. But when you lack those shortcuts, a simple trip to a restaurant requires deciphering this incredibly complex, overwhelming stream of raw data. The brain's working overtime just to establish a baseline understanding of where it is.
Wow. Wait, if we were talking about just a different processing style, like a distinct neurotype where the brain just handles data differently, why is it officially classified as a disability?
That's a really common question.
Right. If it's just a natural variation, why use that specific label?
Well, the disability classification comes directly from the friction between that specific processing style and the physical world.
Friction. Okay, tell me more about that.
Society is engineered almost exclusively for top-down processors. Our environments demand fluent verbal communication, they expect constant eye contact, and they're just filled with chaotic schedules and really intense sensory inputs.
Like fluorescent lights in an office or a classroom.
Exactly. So when a brain doesn't naturally filter out that sensory data, navigating a conventional classroom or a workplace becomes inherently disabling.
I see.
The disability is very real, but a huge portion of it stems from that environmental mismatch, not just an internal deficit.
That environmental mismatch makes so much sense, especially when you look at the sensory experience. Which brings us to a huge myth I want to talk about. The stereotype of the, quote, picky or difficult child.
Oh, this one is so pervasive.
It really is. A parent might mention, their child refuses to wear certain shirts or gags in the texture of mashed potatoes or covers their ears and screams in the grocery store.
And society's default reaction is usually to judge the parents, right? Like, oh, they're just letting their kid be fussy.
Exactly. It's framed as behavioral fussiness or defiance.
Which completely ignores the neurology at play. This isn't fussiness, it's neurological hypersensitivity.
Of your sensitivity.
Right. The central nervous system of an autistic person regulates everyday inputs in a profoundly different way. To a top-down processor, a scratchy tag on a shirt is, a minor annoyance. Your brain tunes it out after a few seconds.
Right, you forget you're even wearing it.
But to an autistic nervous system, that same tag might register as intensely threatening or even physically painful.
Wait, literally painful.
Literally painful. The brain's sensory gating mechanisms aren't blocking the signal, so the sensation is continuous and it's overwhelming.
So when a child covers their ears in the grocery store, they aren't trying to act out?
Not at all.
The mechanical hum of the industrial refrigerators might literally be causing an acute pain response.
Yes, their nervous system is under attack in that moment.
There's a metaphor from the sources that really stuck with me about this. It's about masking. It says it's like trying to do complex calculus in your head,
Oh, I love this one.
while simultaneously trying to carry on a casual conversation at a cocktail party. Like, you might be able to pull it off for a little while, but eventually the sheer cognitive drain is going to cause your brain's battery to just completely die.
That calculus analogy perfectly illustrates masking. And masking happens when an autistic person consciously suppresses their natural neurological responses.
To fit in.
To fit in, yeah, or just to avoid drawing attention in a neurotypical environment. It involves forcing eye contact, hiding the physical pain of sensory overload, manually calculating social responses.
Which takes so much energy.
An extraordinary amount of cognitive energy.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, when that internal battery depletes, the nervous system enters a state of crisis.
Which explains exactly what happens when the volume of the world just gets turned up too high, the battery dies, and we see meltdowns.
Yes.
And this is arguably where parents feel the most external judgment, right? Like, a child has an emotional outburst in the middle of a store, and onlookers immediately label it a tantrum. They view it as bad behavior that needs strict discipline.
Right, but we have to completely separate the concept of a meltdown from a tantrum. They are not the same thing.
How do you tell the difference?
Well, a tantrum is a goal-oriented behavior. A child wants a toy, they cry to get the toy, and once they receive the toy, the behavior stops.
The goal is achieved.
Exactly. A meltdown, on the other hand, is a physiological response to severe distress. It's the result of a sensory cup overflowing or, an unexpected change in routine that has completely overwhelmed the brain's capacity to cope.
So they aren't trying to get anything.
No. The child has lost control of their body and their emotional regulation. They are in a state of absolute fight or flight overwhelm.
And a major part of regulating that overwhelm involves something called stimming, right? Let's unpack that term, because it seems crucial for understanding how the autistic brain self-soothes.
It is entirely crucial.
So stimming is short for self-stimulatory behavior. It might look like hand flapping, rocking back and forth, maybe repeating certain sounds.
Right, and it's important to understand it's not just a random movement. It's an active neurological mechanism the brain uses to process overwhelming sensory input.
Or to discharge excess energy.
Exactly. And the self-advocacy networks and the current psychological research we're looking at strongly warn against intervening to stop these natural regulatory behaviors.
Because historically that wasn't the case, right?
No, historically many compliance-focused therapies, like applied behavioral analysis or ABA, use behavioral conditioning to extinguish those visible autistic traits.
They wanted to stop the stimming.
Yes, to make the child appear more quote-unquote normal.
Which is wild because trying to extinguish a meltdown behavior or suppress stimming without addressing the underlying sensory pain, the sources use this great visual of a house. It's like wallpapering over a massive structural crack in a house's foundation.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
The house might look aesthetically pleasing from the outside for a while, but the structural integrity is failing. By removing that self-soothing behavior, you take away the child's only tool for coping with anxiety.
Right, the internal stress doesn't disappear. It just gets trapped inside.
Which sounds dangerous.
It is. The literature links that exact suppression of self-regulation to severe trauma and long-term burnout. When a child is trained to ignore their body's distress signals, it strips away their autonomy.
So what should parents do instead?
The objective should never be to eradicate the coping behavior. The objective is to identify the environmental trigger causing the distress and adapt the surroundings.
Okay, that makes sense.
And, this dynamic explains a very common phenomenon parents experience, which is a child who holds it together perfectly at school, but then completely falls apart the moment they walk through the front door.
Oh, wow, yeah. I read that section and immediately thought about the guilt parents must carry. When they are the only ones seeing the meltdowns, it feels intensely personal.
It is entirely common for parents to internalize that and to assume the child is being manipulative or that they're doing something wrong as parents.
That they aren't.
No. The neurological reality is that home is often the only environment where the child feels secure enough to drop the mask. It's the only space where they can let their exhausted, overstimulated nervous system finally rest.
So that after-school meltdown
Is a physiological release of a whole day's worth of sensory and social calculus.
that reframes it completely. They're safe with you, they aren't manipulating you.
Exactly.
But when a child's behavior is misunderstood by the outside world, their intentions are often misunderstood as well. And this leads to one of the most toxic myths surrounding autism, which is the idea that autistic individuals lack empathy or just don't care about the feelings of others.
Oh, this misconception is so harmful. And it persists because autistic people express empathy through a different neurological lens than neurotypical people expect. Well, a neurotypical person might show empathy through sustained eye contact or by mirroring facial expressions. An autistic person might struggle with eye contact during a highly emotional moment because it's just too stimulating.
It's too much data.
Right. But neurological research shows autistic individuals experience deep, profound emotions. In fact, they are frequently hyper-empathetic.
Really, like feeling it too much.
Yes, absorbing the emotional distress of the room to the point of being completely overwhelmed by it.
So if the empathy is clearly there, the breakdown is in the translation. The sources compare it to two people trying to communicate, but one is speaking Spanish and the other is speaking Japanese.
That's a brilliant way to phrase it.
Right, like if they can't understand each other, it would be absurd to claim only the Japanese speaker has a communication deficit. They just speak different languages.
Exactly.
And this is what the sources refer to as Damien Milton's double empathy problem.
Yes, the double empathy problem.
Oh.
For decades, the medical establishment placed the burden entirely on the autistic child to learn the normal way of communicating.
They had to learn the neurotypical language.
Right. But the double empathy problem suggests that the non-autistic world needs to learn their language too. It's a two-way street.
So how do we learn their language? What does that look like?
Well, removing the assumption that the neurotypical communication style is the default standard opens up entirely new pathways for connection. Autistic communication often takes forms that are just misread by others.
Like what?
For instance, info dumping.
Info dumping. Okay, what is that?
It's when someone shares highly detailed information about a specialized, intense interest. In neurotypical circles, that might be seen as dominating a conversation, but for an autistic person, it's a profound way of showing affection and attempting to bond.
Oh, wow. So sharing all those facts is their way of connecting with you.
Exactly. Another example is parallel play.
Right, where two individuals sit in the same room engaging in different activities.
Yes, but in comfortable silence. That is a deeply valid form of social connection for an autistic nervous system.
Oh.
That doesn't mean they're ignoring you.
That's beautiful, honestly. But if the communication is just a different language and the sensory experience is a valid neurological variation, we have to look at why society has pathologized autism so heavily for so long.
It's a dark history.
It is. And we cannot do a deep dive on this topic without addressing the medical myths that still dominate the conversation. The absolute biggest one being the supposed link between autism and vaccines.
Right. And the data provided across all credible scientific sources we looked at is unequivocal. Vaccines do not cause autism.
None of them.
None. This persistent narrative originated from a single fraudulent study published by Andrew Wakefield in the late 1990s.
And it was completely debunked.
Entirely. The data in that study was fabricated, the author was stripped of his medical license, and the publication was formally retracted.
But the damage was done.
Unfortunately, yes. But since then, massive global epidemiological studies involving millions of children have repeatedly confirmed there is zero causal link between vaccines and autism.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. Based on the historical data in our own research brief here, there is a statistic that definitely gives people pause.
The prevalence numbers.
Yeah. The prevalence of autism diagnoses jumped from 1 in 150 children in the year 2000 to 1 in 54 more recently. Without context, a massive statistical jump like that makes people assume there is some kind of new environmental epidemic. Like, what is causing the spike?
It's a very fair question. The raw numbers definitely create the illusion of an epidemic, but when you analyze the diagnostic history, it tells a very different story. Autistic people have always existed in these proportions.
So they were always there.
Always. The prevalence rate increased due to two major shifts in the medical field. First, the diagnostic criteria evolved.
Okay.
In 2013, the DSM-5 folded previously separate diagnoses like Asperger's syndrome and pervasive developmental disorder into a single, broader autism spectrum classification.
So the umbrella just got bigger.
Exactly. And second, and arguably more importantly, the medical community began correcting decades of demographic bias.
Oh, right, because the old rigid stereotype was that autism only presented in young white boys who were obsessed with trains and math.
Essentially the Rain Man trope.
Yes, the Rain Man trope.
Because the original diagnostic models were based almost entirely on how autism presented in young boys, entire demographics just slipped through the cracks.
Like girls.
Especially girls. Girls often face intense societal pressure to conform socially from a very young age, meaning they're frequently much more adept at masking their autistic traits.
Going back to that calculus analogy.
Right. And their special interests might also align more closely with neurotypical expectations, like a deep fascination with psychology or animals or a specific band.
So a clinician wouldn't flag a girl who is obsessed with horses, but they would flag a boy obsessed with train schedules.
Exactly. The rising numbers today reflect a medical system that is finally accurately diagnosing adults, women, and people of color who have always been autistic but were historically ignored.
That context completely changes how you view the numbers. It's a correction, not an outbreak. And this leads directly into the language we use to describe the autistic experience, because how we label things dictates how we treat them.
Language is incredibly powerful.
So what specific terms do the self-advocacy networks suggest that parents and professionals actively avoid?
Well, a major consensus within the autistic community is the rejection of functioning labels. So, terms like high functioning and low functioning.
Interesting.
They also strongly advise against using mental age theories. For instance, describing an autistic teenager as having the mind of a toddler.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds incredibly demeaning.
It's infantilizing, and it fails to recognize that cognitive development in autistic individuals is often spiky.
Spiky, like uneven.
Yes. A person might struggle with basic motor skills but possess an advanced understanding of physics. You can't assign a single mental age to that.
But going back to the functioning labels, why are those viewed so negatively? Because I feel like they are ubiquitous in school systems and clinical settings, usually to determine placement, right?
They are. They are used by systems to categorize people, but they ultimately harm both ends of the spectrum.
How so?
When an individual is labeled high functioning because they can speak fluently and perform well academically, institutions frequently use that label to deny them critical accommodations.
Like what kind of accommodations?
Accommodations for severe sensory pain or executive dysfunction.
Oh, let's quickly define executive dysfunction for you listening, because it's a major hidden challenge mentioned in the sources. Executive function is essentially the brain's project manager, right?
Right.
It handles working memory, task initiation, organization. So executive dysfunction isn't laziness, it's a neurological breakdown in that management system. So a high-functioning student might ace a test, but be completely incapable of organizing the steps to clean their room.
Exactly. And because they are labeled high functioning, people just assume they aren't trying hard enough. And conversely, when an individual is labeled low functioning or is non-speaking, society frequently denies them agency.
They assume incompetence.
Yes. The assumption is that because they cannot speak, they cannot understand, which leads to them being completely excluded from decisions regarding their own lives.
That's heartbreaking. So what should we use instead?
Advocacy networks suggest replacing functioning labels with discussions about specific, individualized support needs.
Just name the actual support they need.
Exactly.
This shift in language really ties into a massive paradigm shift that the sources talk about, known as the social model of disability.
Yes, this is so important.
Right. So the traditional medical model views the individual as broken. It states that the brain is disordered and needs to be fixed or cured or trained to act normal. But the social model argues that the person isn't broken, the environment is simply inaccessible.
The disability is generated by the interaction between the individual's impairment and an unaccommodating society.
Julia Bascom, she's an autistic self-advocate mentioned in the text. She offers a brilliant visual analogy for this. She explains that being autistic in a world that demands chaotic noise, bright fluorescent lights, and constant eye contact is like sitting at the bottom of a flight of stairs in a wheelchair.
That's a great metaphor.
If someone breaks their leg, they need a doctor. That's the medical model. But if someone cannot climb the stairs, they don't need a doctor to cure their legs. They need society to build a ramp.
And the entire concept of neurodiversity is focused on building the ramp.
So practically speaking, what does building a ramp look like for an autistic child?
Well, it might mean providing a pair of noise-canceling headphones in a loud cafeteria. It might mean allowing them to regulate their nervous system through stimming without correcting them.
Right, without trying to stop it.
Exactly. It might involve utilizing an augmentative and alternative communication device, like an iPad, instead of demanding spoken words. The objective is altering the environment to accommodate the child's neurological needs, rather than forcing the child's nervous system to conform to the environment.
That makes perfect sense. So for the parents listening who are actively absorbing this completely new framework, the final step here is translating all of this into an action plan. How do families move forward with true acceptance?
The foundational step in any action plan is adopting a philosophy called presuming competence.
Presuming competence.
Yes, you operate on the unwavering belief that your child is thinking, feeling, and understanding everything around them, even if their outward communication doesn't look typical.
You assume they're in there and they get it.
Absolutely. You recognize that with individualized, respectful support, they possess a profound capacity to learn and thrive. True acceptance involves celebrating their natural way of existing. It requires letting go of the neurotypical expectations you may have had and learning to joyfully engage with the actual autistic child in front of you.
And the sources highlight that parents do not have to undertake this paradigm shift alone, and they honestly shouldn't rely solely on clinical professionals. One of the most vital resources available is the parent-to-parent support network.
These networks are lifesavers.
This is a system where newly navigating families are matched with veteran parents of autistic children.
The value of lived experience just cannot be overstated. A clinical professional can provide a diagnosis and explain the neurobiology, but a peer parent has lived the daily reality.
They've been in the trenches.
Right. A veteran parent can share practical strategies for adapting a home environment. They can help decode the complexities of school accommodations and provide deep emotional support. And, most importantly, they can articulate the profound joy and unique perspective that comes with parenting an autistic child.
Which is a narrative that is far too often completely absent from the clinical literature.
It really is.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've established that autism is a natural genetic variation of the human brain. It's characterized by a bottom-up processing style that absorbs every microscopic detail of the world. It involves deeply felt emotions, intensely valid sensory experiences, and entirely unique communication styles.
All of which are valid.
Yes. For the parents listening, your role is not to act as a therapist trying to fix your child. Your role is to advocate for them, to presume their competence, and to build the environmental ramps they need to navigate a top-down world.
And shifting that perspective from trying to change a child to trying to deeply understand their neurological language allows you to see their incredible strengths. It reveals a brilliant, detail-oriented way of experiencing the world that you might otherwise have missed entirely.
So well said. To close out today's deep dive, there is one final thought from the advocacy research that fundamentally reframes the everyday challenges of the autistic experience. It reads, "Autistic burnout isn't about working too hard. It's about being denied the right to exist authentically. Take a moment to look around your home today. Observe the lighting, evaluate the daily expectations, and look at the rigidity of the routines. What small, practical change can you make to your physical environment right now so that your child doesn't have to work quite so hard just to exist?"